This conversation is brought to you with the kind compliments of CALL, that is, the Commonwealth of Learning. Gender inequality must be eradicated, and CALL is on a mission to help in its obliteration. It has embarked on a project to help young women and girls become motivated to pursue their fields of interest and build the future generation of leaders by launching the Commonwealth Wise Woman Project. This is a mentoring program that links girls from across the Commonwealth with mentors also from across the Commonwealth who are women in leadership roles with a story deserving of emulation. But CALL does not stop there. CALL is now taking that initiative further by creating this podcast series where I get the opportunity and privilege to interview some of these distinguished women and hear the path they took or the path that took them to leadership. COVID-19 has joined the long list of contributors to gender inequality, including globalization, technology, and climate change. But stay with us through this 10-episode series and hear how women have made their way over and around these hurdles. I am Dr. Ann Wallace, a higher education management and e-learning specialist, and I will be your host. Today's episode is titled Leading with Heart, brought to us by Professor Diane Gibson. Welcome, Professor Gibson.
Hello, Anne. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Thank you ever so much. What I'd like to start with is to introduce our audience to you by reading a bit of your very, very impressive bio. So if you'll just allow me to read a bit, I'll look away and read this bio so they know who Diane Gibson is. Professor Gibson is a distinguished professor, health and aging, at the University of Canberra. She has worked in 4 universities and spent 15 years in leadership roles in the Australian public service sectors. Her strong interest in the policy research interface has characterized her work across the sectors of health, aging, gender, and social policy. Previously, the inaugural Dean of Health at the University of Canberra, she led the addition of 7 new disciplines, tripled the size of the faculty, and built a vibrant research culture. She has won over $50 million of funding relating to innovative clinical training projects and partnerships, and another $14 million in research grants. She was the academic lead on the development of the University of Canberra's innovative health precinct, which brought several health partnerships to campus, including a cancer treatment center and a major rehabilitation hospital. In her former role in the Australian Public Service, she established the Aging and Aged Care Unit, which produced the first national report on aged care in Australia, and subsequently led the development of a number of national data collections across community services. She is a fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences. Professor Gibson is nationally and internationally recognized for her research on aging and aged care. Her current work research focus is on aging and technology, ageism in healthcare, and aged care policy. Professor Gibson, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us. You're a distinguished professor. You are a prolific author. You are an outstanding, a phenomenal fundraiser for research. You're an academic and you're a practitioner, and you've taken the time to be with us. I really do appreciate this very much. Please, for us to get started, tell our audience what you do.
Well, as a research professor, I guess it would be possible to think that I'm spending my time in my office writing wise things and reading clever books written by other people. And I do some of that, but a lot of my time is also spent working with my colleagues. And at the moment, I'm working on 3 projects, all of which, curiously, involve developments in dementia care. Now, dementia care is not my research focus, but it is focus of members of my research team and some fascinating people in my community in Canberra. So they're all things that I think will make a difference and change the way we provide care here in Canberra, and maybe some leadership nationally and even internationally. Who knows where one's influence will go.
Well, you are really involved in something very important. This is exciting. You know, the jury is still out on whether leadership is by nature or nurture. At what stage did you realize that you would be a leader?
Well, Dr. Wallace, I think that I realized that I was a leader when you asked me to do this interview. Because I never thought of myself as a leader. And that's a curious thing and something perhaps we should reflect on. But I think of myself as someone who does things, someone who, as I like to say, builds stuff. And that stuff can be buildings or people or courses or training or research. So I guess making a difference was probably part of what I wanted to do from when I was very young.
Okay. You see, what I'm hearing coming out of this is that your whole persona, all of you, is taken up with leadership. Tell us then, as you said, it came to you from the time you were young. Tell us about your school years in Australia and what in that experience took you into the role of public health leadership, because that's where you are.
I think I was fortunate in my secondary schooling, actually, to attend an all-girls school where many of the teachers were women who were not married. Some of them had lost their fiancés in World War II. That's the cohort of women that were largely teaching us. One or two were divorced, but it was an environment where there were single women teaching and just being, I suppose, role models. It wasn't a conscious thought that I had, but it was certainly the case that it was a strong female environment. And I'd also say that the girls I went to school with were pretty amazing too. I mean, some of them were horrible some of the time, and some of them were wonderful all of the time, but they've gone on to do some really interesting things. And I recall, because I should say, I grew up in a mining town. It was a city of 50,000 people where the main industries were mining and woolen mills and the railway workshops. So it was a working class town, I guess. That would be the way I would describe it. And these girls were just terrific in what they were planning to achieve and what they went on to achieve. I recall being asked by a woman, what was it about the Ipswich Girls' Grammar School that produced so many amazing women? And I don't really know the answer to that, but certainly it was a great cohort of girls that I was at school with.
So what it is that one's environment helps to build the character and future. It inculcates that sense of leadership in you, even without you focusing on it as leadership.
Yes.
Yeah.
My parents, my father was a teacher, my mother was a music teacher. And both of them were very, very committed to education and that and to girls being educated. Okay. My dad once told me a story that a colleague had said to him, why are you bothering with your daughters and education? They're only going to grow up and get married and have children. And to which he replied, that was the most important thing to him, to actually give his daughters an education, and that all girls deserved a good education. I was brought up with that very strongly.
That's unusual.
It was at that time.
Yes.
It was at that time.
Okay. But something that I think has persisted to today is, you know, when I went to school, talkative children were told to shut up and listen. I know they did because they told me to shut up often. Were you a talkative child?
I was a talkative child, and I do recall one moment at secondary school when one of the teachers said, turned to me and said, "Be quiet in peanut gallery." I didn't know what peanut gallery was, but I've since learned that it was an area of the theatre, the kind of cheap seats where people sat and were noisy and sometimes threw peanuts at the stage.
Okay.
But I guess for me, that talkativeness is in some ways associated with either relaxation or nervousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think when I'm nervous, I talk too much. And the problem with that I've learned is that I don't listen enough. So being relaxed, I think, is a very important component of being talkative, because you remember to listen.
Okay, well, that's something new. That's something to learn. I hope our listeners are paying attention to that. Being talkative helps you to be relaxed, and it helps you to listen. I wish the teachers back then knew that. But coming to to today's world, working in public health must be very, very exciting. But I am sure it comes with its fair share of stressful moments. I can well imagine that leading in an environment of highly skilled professionals, it takes some doing. What is your leadership philosophy? Now, I know you said that you do not consider yourself a leader, and that is because of the modesty that makes up Professor Diane Gibson, but you are a leader. You do leading things. So what is your leadership philosophy?
This is a question where people often have a stock answer, because there are lots of books that tell you what leadership styles you can choose from. I've always found that a really difficult concept, I guess. For me, leadership is based in the place and the space and the people that I'm with at that point in time. And my leadership philosophy is very much based on my values. I think that good values are critical to good leadership. So a commitment to equity and fairness and supporting one's colleagues, all of these things go into crafting a team and achieving an objective. So one has to have one's mind on strategy. And I've said I like to build, which means I like to transform. But one also has to have one's eye on one's people and building their capacity and their culture. So I guess my leadership philosophy is values-based. It's responsive to the environment in which I find myself. And so it's flexible. And these are important elements.
Important. That's wonderful. Your leadership is based on the environment you're in and the people you're with. And it is such an authentic statement because, as you say, you don't have a stock reply. It is just you saying how you lead and what makes you lead and the values that have contributed to this leadership. But talking about that, being in the environment, as a female leader, what is the reaction when you are leading males?
So this can be difficult, and it can be easy. It depends on the male colleagues. And I think what I would want to say to the people listening, to the women and men listening to this podcast, is that you never know really which men are very relaxed, with a female leader
Mhm.
and which men are uncomfortable. Now, being uncomfortable is not a bad thing. It doesn't make people bad men or bad colleagues, but it may mean that they need more careful handling.
Mhm.
They may be more easily offended by a woman talking more abruptly or more aggressively in ways in which I, as a leader, never intended.
Mhm.
We often think in this kind of question that men are perhaps very bolshy and difficult and they won't respond. But sometimes they can be difficult because they struggle with hearing those kinds of directions and instructions and even criticisms from a woman. I don't think there's an easy solution to this, but I do think one has to be sensitive to it. And of course, other women, Anne,
Yes,
can
yes,
be very difficult as well.
as well.
Can I diverge into this topic of other women?
Please do, because what we want is for our young women to understand what the realities are in going into leadership. And it is not just one gender that makes things. Well, you tell us.
Well, I think that at a critical point in my career, I happened to become pregnant. And as you know, Anne, I have 4 children, but at the time I wasn't sure that I wanted to have any. But life happens. I was in academia. I was in universities that were actually moving between 2 universities that were the 2 pilot universities for moving from one university to another, and both were pilot universities for affirmative action in Australia. And I was pregnant, and I encountered an amazing level of resistance, and also a lack of support from female colleagues. And so much so that when I went to my new institution, they didn't actually talk to me. So pregnancy and having children was not common in academia for women at that time. It sounds ridiculous, but there weren't very many women, and the ones that were there, most didn't have partners, and there were very few with children. So they'd given up that side of their lives in order to pursue their careers. And someone coming in, a young woman coming in with children, or with one child even, was perceived as a threat, I think. So when you're working with an environment that is very male dominated, your female colleagues are really important to you, and it can be very, very distressing when they are not supporting you. So I would just give a shout out to all the women that do support other women, and encourage all of the girls and young women listening to remember to build their female networks and to support each other.
Great. I thank you very much for that, because I believe that that situation still exists. I mean, it may be a little different now, and politically speaking, the focus is on the gender differences. But I think what you have just described still exists, and it is good for our young women to know that they have a role to play in supporting the female network. But when now I understand, first of all, you came from a different background, different in that you had a family circle that insisted on your education. Your father said, hey, this is a girl, but so what? She's to be educated. So I could understand that. But when you entered this profession, and notwithstanding your baby bump causing your fellow females to give you a little bit of grief, when you entered this profession, was it common for women to pursue this kind of career, and how were you treated? How were you treated?
My first job as an academic was at the Australian National University in the research school, and I was very, very excited. I remember walking in the front door of that building and just looking around and thinking, wow, I'm here at the Australian National University in the Research School of Social Sciences, and how amazing is that? That research school had 100 staff, 97 men and 3 women as academic staff. And I think the best way of representing what it was like then was to say, there's 2 things, 2 stories. One, if I was ever in the corridors talking to my 2 other female colleagues, and you could imagine that would happen, and they were both terrific women, and I was younger than them, the men who walked past would slow down and stare and try to listen to work out what we were talking about. What were these women plotting? It's not clear to me what 3 women could do in an environment of 100 still, but there was that sense of being watched. The other story is in my, I think, 3rd week or so there, I decided I would go to a seminar, and I'm an introvert, and I've struggled with confidence my whole life. And if you don't have natural confidence, you just have to struggle and fight that fight. But I took myself off to a seminar, feeling a little anxious, feeling a little nervous. I opened the door, and the professor of sociology was just introducing the seminar. So he was just literally saying, let me start by welcoming you all. I walked in the door, and he stopped dead, and there was silence. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he said, yes. And I said, nothing, because I was like a deer in the headlights. He said, well, do you have a message for someone? And I said, no, no, I just came to the seminar, and I crept across the room and sat in the back corner and was very quiet for the whole hour and a half, as you would expect. But he had assumed I was a secretary, yes, or someone from the mailroom. Mm-hmm. And that environment of expectation that you weren't an academic, that you were a research assistant, or was just repeated over and over again, perhaps not so dramatically, but that was the most difficult thing. And I guess I did look young for my age, I know that, but still, I was 26, so I think that's a really interesting aspect of being a woman in a male environment, that you don't know what's being thought about you until you actually start a conversation or enter a new environment.
That's a very interesting situation. I mean, you've talked about what I think we tend to describe as the imposter syndrome, something that is visited upon women more so than the others. And here you are in an environment with 97 men, 1 of 3 women, a young 26-year-old. Would you say at any time a leadership role was evident to you at that stage? Or is this something you envisioned and worked towards it anyway?
Well, I think, Anne, that we've already established that I have ambivalent feelings about this idea of leadership. But at that point, I was the junior person in a 3, sometimes 4-person team, but I was certainly trying to do what we did well. I led the development of the research survey that we were working on, but I didn't think about it as leadership. I thought about it as doing this work really well and bringing other people along with me. So maybe there's some kind of term that means you're a leader lacking in reflection skills, lacking in the ability to diagnose what you're doing. I know I always had that passion to do more, to do it better, to see opportunities.
Yet, what I am hearing is that you pretty much fall into the category of a transformational leader. You want to do things for others, and you want to bring others along with you. And I think that that is great. In fact, I was looking at something that you tweeted recently, and you said that every day counts for everyone from the start right to the finish. Just as it is never too early to help a child make the most of their life, it's equally never too late for an older person. Now, it is not, it is a retweet. You were retweeting something, and you said that that's a perspective that you hold dearly. And when I think of that and what you have just said about how you just did what you felt you needed to do, I ask you, what would you say to a young girl or woman? When should they start feeling ambitious? When is it the right time? How do they know that they ought to be ambitious?
Now is the right time. Start being ambitious from the very beginning. And the beginning is today. So if you're 6 or 16 or 66, now is the time to be ambitious for yourself and for your community. And I'd like to come back to community if we could at some point, Anne, and for the world. So the goals might be small, they might be large, they might be incremental steps. Incremental steps often turn out to be zigzag steps, but yes, the time is definitely now.
Yes. That is, I just love what you just said. The time is now. And the fact that those incremental steps are actually very often zigzag steps. I think what we want our girls to know is that in zigging and zagging, they're making it on the leadership path. I know you don't like the word leadership, but that's the path.
No, it's not that I don't like it. I have cognitive dissonance about it. That is, yes.
Spoken like a true social scientist.
Indeed. But it is that sense of distance. Here is me, here is it. And you mentioned imposter syndrome. I know a lot of people, men and women, feel that. And then a lot of others don't. And those of us who feel imposter syndrome don't understand the people who just don't get it at all and feel very comfortable in their various roles. But can we go back to the zigging and zagging? Because
yes, please explain a bit more about your zigs and zags.
Well, I started off at university doing medicine. I felt that becoming a doctor was a way that I could help people and make a contribution to my community. So, but it wasn't a good fit, and there were also some social class differences. I was in a medicine program that had a lot of people from very wealthy families, and I struggled with how I fitted into that environment. So partly it wasn't the best fit for me academically, but also I struggled with my peers, clothes, the way in which people presented themselves. So I then shifted into social sciences and ultimately did my PhD in program evaluation and health. But that led to an academic career for quite a long while. I just then, though, in the context of some difficult personal circumstances, when I became a single parent with 4 children, the eldest of whom was 8 and the youngest of whom was 2, I picked myself up and I moved cities and I took a job in the Australian Public Service. Now, I was through and through an academic, but then I became a public service person. I had to actually learn about leadership terms and administration, and I remember being totally flummoxed. Somebody sent me an email saying, please return this by COB. I didn't know what COB was. I was an academic. we floated through days and weeks. We might be really busy, but I had to email back and say, what is COB? Close of business. New concept. Becoming a public servant. And I was appointed to head up the aging and aged care unit, which I did, but then over a period of years, ended up in a more senior role. And a lot of what I was doing then was working with the states and territories and trying to negotiate data collections, very different from where I'd started off. And then some years later, that workplace and I were no longer a good fit. These things happen. I'd had some terrific bosses, some terrific colleagues, but I wasn't happy. And I jumped ship back into the university sector to become a dean. Well, I'd left academia as a senior lecturer, and here I was suddenly a dean of a health faculty with some clinical staff. And that was a change again, and I had to readjust and learn more. And a vice chancellor who wanted to take our university from a very poor position, the university wasn't in very good shape at all, financially, in terms of its education, and the way in which it was regarded for its teaching, in terms of its research, and bring it into the international global rankings of top ranked universities, which he did succeed in doing, or I should say we succeeded in doing. And that just required a whole new skill set, including working on the health precinct, which was essentially property development, partnerships, and building design. And, you know, all of these changes.
Well, this is great. That is one exciting path. I think what I'm hearing and what I'm hoping our young ladies are hearing is that you just use the environment to develop. There you are in an environment where you felt maybe you didn't quite belong because of somebody looking differently in terms of their clothes and their social status, etc. And you have just transcended all of that by your perseverance and your commitment and your wanting to do what must do. You also zigged into so many different areas. And as you were zigging, you continued leading, you continued developing, and you were just, you know, there's this modern saying that life happens. What you've just told us is how life happens. Started off as a young lady about to have your first baby and be frowned on, and now then you're still a young lady with 4 children and starting life all over again. This is great. What it says is that a person needs to take up recognition of where they are and use the circumstances.
And then adversity is really difficult. You can't just overcome it in 5 minutes, but it is possible to work through it. Those difficult times shape us. They help us to understand other people. I think they make us kinder, and I think they make us more understanding of the difficulties others face. So while I've had some difficult times in my life, and I'm not going to say I've dealt with them brilliantly, but I've dealt with them and I've come through, and I'm kind of grateful for them in that they helped me, I think, to become a better person.
Great. You see, you've talked again about adversity and diversity. It seems the two have gone hand in hand in helping you in your development and your forward movement. Now, you do a lot of work, a lot of crucial work for your country, Australia. You're a lifelong learner. You're doing things for the benefit of the rest of the world. How do you find time to fit all of this into life?
I think I would have to say that I often don't do that very well. And sometimes I do. And I think that flexibility is critical for me, but for other people, it's a routine. So you need to find your own way of doing that. I would say, please try to take the moments. If the moments are all you have, if 2 minutes of looking at the trees or watching your dog sleep, all you have, take those moments and breathe and try to center yourself, because sometimes that's all you have. I know I still laugh because being a single parent with 4 children and a really busy job and not enough money for help, so doing it all yourself is a pretty hard gig. It's a pretty hard gig. And you find yourself making, making decisions about, is it okay? It's okay to brush my teeth while I'm in the shower, but I can't brush my teeth and wash my hair at the same time. It's probably completely inappropriate to brush my teeth while I'm going to the toilet. So making these decisions that squish life into particular minutes, because I still watch my kids, if they're microwaving something, they will stand there and for 2 minutes while the microwave does its thing.
Yeah.
I will, in those 2 minutes, I will think I can unstack the dishwasher, or I can feed the dog, or I could wipe down the benches, and I still have that kind of use every minute.
Okay.
Way of thinking about the world, even though my kids have now all left home. Routines help some people. Flexibility helps some people. Lists and writing down what's important to you for the day is really helpful. Some days you don't get time for a list.
The Pathway to Female Leadership is brought to you with the kind compliments of the Commonwealth Wise Woman Project.
Before we went to break, you were telling us about how you squish together the work-life balance or the work-life integration. And what I was getting from you, as you said, even if it is just to take a moment and look at the trees, what I'd like you to tell our listeners is why it is important to do this, and especially why is it important for a female leader to do this, to take a break and squish or unsquish.
Yes, I think unsquish. It's important because we often don't take care of ourselves. It's a bit tough to generalize. Some women are good at taking care of themselves, but I would say women leaders often aren't. And we can't continue to give to others unless we take a little bit of time to renew ourselves. And you can run on empty for quite a long time. I promise you can. I've done it. But it's better. It's better if you can renew yourself. And there will be times in your life when you can't. There will be times when you can get up early and go for a walk or a run. There will be times when you can get someone to look after the kids so you can go to the gym at night. But then there will be times when that's just not possible.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. And that's when you have to take the moments and try to center yourself in them.
Yes, try to center yourself in the moments. Wow. You've explained to us a lot of things about your path to leadership. You've talked about gender related challenges and surprisingly not the gender we thought that would give you the main challenge. But the thing is that you have shown that you are able to overcome all of this and still do the wonderful things that you're doing for healthcare in Australia. and for the rest of the world. You operate in a caregiving world. I mean, I know that you are at the top of the heap. You're in the highest possible policymaking level. And it's a world of nurturing and caring that clearly stemmed from your being in the very beginning. It is a world also that is normally ascribed to women, the qualities of nurturing and caring ascribed to women. How would you say a young woman recognizing those qualities in herself can use that towards developing leadership skills?
That is a wonderful question, Anne. And I think that young women need to think about what their own values are, what their own attributes and skills, and follow their own path. If nurturing and caring are core elements of your person, then that will help shape your leadership skills, but perhaps they're not. I was talking to my daughter about, one of my daughters, about this discussion that we're having. And I said, what would you say? And she said, oh, tell the girls not to try to be men. And I think that's really something that we could unpack. She went on to say, that male leadership styles are not necessarily the best kind, and that women should develop their own womanly leadership styles. But she also said that if you are a masculine woman that values certain kinds of attributes, then that's fine as well. So I think the answer to this is, as always, many different styles for many different people. But the trick for women is, how much do you conform? Now, I'm sitting here looking at you with your beautiful curls, and I'm sitting here with my, well, slightly less beautiful curls, but
very beautiful curls.
I straightened my hair for years as part of conforming to what a public servant would look like, what a dean would look like, to try to fit in, to try to pass as one of these senior leaders and bureaucrats. So the challenge for the young women and girls now is to think, how much are they going to try to pass and fit in with whatever the environment is, and how much are they going to try to change it? So if it's a really masculine dominated environment, do you want to copy that in subtle ways, in your clothes, in your way of presenting yourself, in the way you talk? Or do you want to shift that pattern into a female style, or just a little bit shift it? And these are hard questions because you might lose out. Conforming can mean that you move ahead more quickly, and challenging the status quo can mean that you don't. But it can also mean that you change the world.
Yes.
Even if it's just a small world that you're working in. So it's tricky. And if your income and your job depend on conforming, then you need to conform. And if you have the ability to change that game even a little bit, then go ahead and change it, is what I say.
Diane, we started off with you saying that you work in the environment, and that is all you have said throughout this conversation. You take the environment and you make it work for you. I like the fact that you're saying to our listeners, our female listeners, do not try to be men. Yet you're saying to them, they need to work with what is presented to them. If straightening the hair is what is needed, then do it until it is no longer needed. But if you can conform and keep your hair curly, then keep your hair curly, but still make sure you do what is needed for you to succeed in that environment. I mean, this, and what you've said is for our girls who are our primary audience, but I think it also applies to all girls and boys. listening to us. So I want you to send a message in the interest of equality, which is clearly a part of your being. Send a message to all listening who are trying to make their way in this world of work and trying to find a leadership footing.
My message would be, try to think through what it is that you want to change now. What is important in your environment to you that you can change in a small way or a big way? There are so many challenges for young people in our society. We haven't, I thought we would. 40 years ago, I thought we would, but we haven't got over the issue of sexism in the workplace. But we also haven't got over racism and ageism and so many other isms that relate to treating people unfairly on the basis of culture or religion or skin color or whatever it might be. We haven't, we tried 40 years ago to work on issues that related to climate and the environment. The big topic then was overpopulation of humans. We haven't solved that either. So, and indeed, it's become worse. So there are lots of challenges out there. Pick your challenge and work towards changing it. And as you do that, you will be a leader and you will make a difference.
Wow, I am going to listen to this recording and I'm going to quote that. Pick your challenge and determine how you want to work towards changing it. As you do that, you will become a leader. Oh, in the jargon of today, Diane, Professor Diane Gibson, you are a high achiever. What can we expect from a leading lady down under?
Well, so I mentioned at the beginning of the interview that I'm working with some groups of people who are doing some really interesting things in dementia care in Canberra that may lead to changes elsewhere. My own work as an individual is that I want to do something about ageism in healthcare. I see it all around, I read about it all around, and I have written something, I will publish something, but I'm trying to think about how I can advocate and really get people to realize how much ageism there is in the way in which we do healthcare. Even with the COVID vaccines, most of the COVID vaccines, when they were trialed, and they didn't trial them on people over the age of 65. And as people age, their bodies are different. So it's important to, and women's and men's bodies are different, and they often only trial drugs on men as well. But so I want to try to learn how to advocate more actively than just by writing things. And I'm not sure how to do that. And the other thing, I suppose, is a few years ago, I took up kayaking, and I'm not very good at it, but I have eventually managed to get to 5 kilometers. So I'm going to try to learn how to be able to kayak for 10 kilometers. Okay. And I would say taking up new things and not being afraid to be bad at them is a really important part of what I'll be doing.
Great. That is fantastic. So it is not just a matter of taking a moment to look at the trees and have a sip of coffee. Do a little kayaking now and again. And all
and don't be afraid to try new stuff, even if you're pretty bad at it.
Thank you so much, Professor Diane Gibson. We have been in conversation with an extraordinary, charming female leader from the Commonwealth, hailing from Canberra in Australia, Professor Diane Gibson.
behalf of the Commonwealth of Learning Wise Women Project, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. Tune in for our next episode when we have another dynamic female leader from across the Commonwealth. I am Dr. Ann A. Wallace, signing off until the next time.